Hello everyone, welcome to YouTube Model Builders Tuesday night presentation. We have the great pleasure of having Miles Hale and Bill, the track planner, on with us tonight. We kind of got a little bit of a treat for next year going, that's going to be in the schedule for next year. They're going to alternate through the months, and the one's going to do 6 months and the other one's going to do 6 months. So it should be out pretty good. Miles has a pretty good schedule going for him so far. He's going to be at a lot of different layouts. He's going to televise live from those layouts and talk about different things. So everybody that's watching in tonight, stay tuned with the schedule for next year. Should have that posted. I should start getting them posted here shortly, maybe right after the holidays. But anyways, it's pretty nice to have Miles and Bill on board. I know that Miles has been doing quite a few different presentations with Barry, and he's been in quite a few of the live shows as well. I just want to make sure everybody knows that these Hangout presentations are a proud sponsor of the YouTube Model Builders. YouTube Model Builders, eMags, Hangouts, and the live show. The eMags bi-monthly has 50 some odd different pages of free subscription. There's a lot of cool information in there. JD and his crew have done exceptional on the eMag. Matter of fact, I think I'll probably give him a little bit of piece in tonight's presentation to see what our next subscription's all about. The live show as well with Barry and Bill, Big Bill Graham. They come at you every month. They bring in different guests to come in there and discuss all kinds of different things. Kind of the Hangouts is a little bit of a follower of those shows. Sometimes when they have a certain discussion or topic that they're talking about, the live show, then we'll kind of do a follow-up of some of the live shows. Next year, we're going to do a little bit of different things on the schedule. It'll kind of stay the same. It'll be Gino, me, hopefully Troy can come back in after the first of the year, and then we got Barry and Mike. They do a tech show, and all of us do one hangout a month, and then we do have the Thursday night general hangouts that we go over. Johnny Reb from Southeast Rails, he's the moderator of that. They get in there and they have certain discussions about the certain topics that they bring up to talk about. I know that they've gone about 2 hours, I would say. They've had some pretty good topics in there. I've stopped in there for a little while just to see what was going on. And so other than that, I think I'll go ahead and pass it on over to Miles Hale, and he can discuss next year's schedule with you guys. He's got a lot of cool stuff going on. And so anyways, with further ado, here is Miles Hale.
Hi, how's everybody doing? Got quite a few, I got a little bit of a different slant on things for the next year. I'm going to be doing every other month, and I start in February. And I'll be going around to different layouts, and what I'm going to do is talk to those layout owners about their layouts, what concept they have, how they operate at them, how they're building it, because some of them have vastly different ways of going about actually building the layout. And we'll talk about maybe the camaraderie that they've developed with other people in getting this thing done. So I have a few notes here that I need to read off, some thank yous to some people. I hope you'll bear with me for the next hour here. No, that's silly. Okay, so anyways, what I want to do, though, is tell you about the schedule that we've got coming. Because on February 9th, we'll have Larry Alfred. Larry has an ON3 and O2 rail layout that he's building. and it is the San Juan, the Rio Grande Southern Railroad for his ON3, and then he has kind of a freelance in his O scale. And it's quite a unique railroad in the concept of how he plans on the viewers and operators seeing the trains as they go around the layout and how he plans on having them operate. And he does have operating stations around on the layout. So it's really kind of a super different concept in how to build a railroad. And I think it'd be kind of interesting for people to see that you can break the mold and still make things work. Then on April 26th, I have a real treat. Few people have seen this railroad at the start, and that is Steve Priest's railroad. And for those of you that don't know Steve, he was the editor of the NMRA magazine. His wife, Cynthia, is still the editor of that magazine. And Steve, in the meantime, took on Railroad Model Craftsman. He and his cohort in business bought the rights to Railroad Model Craftsman, and they have started publishing that magazine again. They're back on the newsstand. I just picked up this month's copy. It's dynamite. You really ought to take a look at it. He's a sensational graphic artist. He also happens to have worked for the Santa Fe as an engineer, so he understands the railroad. He brings that railroad knowledge to the magazines that he is associated with. And I think between he and Cynthia and White River Productions, they publish about 7 magazines a month, all of them basically railroad related. A lot of them are some for the historical societies around the country. So fantastic guy. Concept of railroad is operation, 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 double-decked. It should be absolutely fantastic. And his son, and I think Cynthia and maybe some of his crew will be there with us to kind of talk about how this railroad is evolving. He is in the process of building, so we'll kind of see what his progress is by April. Then in June 28th, that weekend before, Fran and I will be at the Lone Star Region Regional Convention for the NMRA, doing some hands-on clinics on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We're going to leave the convention on Sunday and head south to San Antonio, Texas, my old hometown, interim hometown anyway. I'm kind of a half transplanted Texan. That was my club from the time that I got back from Vietnam, and for about 20 years after that. And grew up down there, grew up in that club. It's called SAMRA, San Antonio Model Railroad Association. They have purchased their own land and building about 2 decades ago, actually, long after I left, but a long time ago. And since then, they've been building a fantastic HO railroad, lots of special effects, modeling the MKT and all the railroads that ran into and out of San Antonio. And they do operate with regular operations sessions. They also have work sessions, and some pretty spectacular scenery is in place. August 23rd, my game plan is to go back to my other hometown. I've only had about, well, those of you that know me know that I was in 14 states in 11 years after Fran and I got married. We worked for almost every model railroad manufacturer, and we moved all across the country almost continuously. At any rate, I worked for Vermont American, a tool manufacturer in Louisville, Kentucky, for almost 7 years, and got to know the group there, I think, really pretty well. I've got an awful lot of really good friends there. One of them is Russ Weiss, and if Russ is watching this, I'm sorry, Russ, I didn't get a chance to call you and tell you that I'm bringing the TV show to you, but I'm planning on doing it, so I'll give you a call after the show and make sure it's okay. Hey, time got tight. So, anyway, Eric Wagner's my other friend over there, and I guarantee you we will have a railroad from Louisville on August the 23rd. I hope that it will be Russ Weiss. He's modeling New York City. He has taken DPM and Magnuson and Lundy Studios buildings, and he's building these skyscraper buildings. It looks, without some of the, how shall I say this, without some of the nuances of George Cellulos's railroad, it looks like the big city, because his buildings really are. They're just humongous. They run 2.5, 3 feet tall, all of them, and they really dwarf the trains. It's, as my friend John Lorance says, it's the mountains of New York dwarfing the trains, or the canyons of New York dwarfing the trains. He's a fantastic scenery modeler. He's well along, probably about 80, 90% of his scenery is done. It should be a fantastic railroad to go see. On October 11th, I come back here to the Kansas City area, and I'll be at Steve McKee's railroad. Now, I'm a little bit prejudiced because I designed that railroad, and Bill and I have talked about designs and whatever back and forth, but this railroad is in about a 4,000 square foot basement, I believe, or 3,500, something in that range. So we had plenty of room. We took the Rio Grande Southern, and I'm sorry we're going back to that again, and the San Juan, but it literally has that entire railroad duplicated. Admittedly, we shrunk some of the distance, selectively compressed, between towns, but all the towns are laid out exactly like they really were on the prototype, and they're facing the correct direction as the trains approach, including the lumber area, all of the towns, the main yard. It's pretty spectacular. And he is using all Bragdon scenery products, so it's all Bragdon mountains. Almost all of the scenery is in, and he's now working on the buildings to finish that. And he has a super interesting way of how he went about building the railroad, so we'll kind of go with Steve on that. And then on the last one, on December 27th, I'm sorry, but you got this wild and crazy guy who models ON30 in downtown streets of Kansas City. I know you all remember the narrow gauge railroad that ran through Kansas City. At any rate, it'll be back here at my house, and I'm going to show you hopefully a little bit more progress on my railroad so that you don't see a bunch of white. That gives me almost a year to kind of get things rolling and do some finished scenery. And I'll talk about some of the ways that I went about creating some of my canyons and doing some of my scenery. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much what we're going to try and do, is travel around the country, see a whole bunch of different railroads and different concepts on how those railroads were built and how the owners see that their railroad should perform when they go to operate on them.
Are these all op session style layouts? I mean, are they do operations on them?
I'm looking at my list. Yes, I believe so.
Okay, that's good, because that was something we were discussing, just before the show started, about operations sessions, So, yes. It's funny how these layouts that you're going to go to, and then we're going to have Bill doing a monthly thing too, and there could be questions followed up from your show for his show, because some of the different parts of the layout that you're going to be displaying on our Tuesday presentations. I think that's really cool. I kind of would like to know what the outcome of the phone call from that one gentleman that you haven't let him know yet.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, just so the viewers know, about using car cards or some type of physical, I would call it movement program or movement way to move the cars around, as opposed to JMRI or Ship It or Rail Op. There's a lot of the computer ones out there. This will, I think, be somewhat of a mixture of the way that cars are moved. I'm pretty sure that Larry Alford will do a card operation. Steve Priest, I think, probably will do some type of computer operation. And Steve actually will have a CTC, a centralized control panel, a dispatcher off in a different room, has telephones to communicate with. So really big time Class 1 railroad. Samra, I believe, does the same thing. Russ Weiss, I'm not sure about because I haven't talked to him yet. Steve McKee, I believe, will do car cards, and I will do a form of car cards as well.
Cool.
Sure sounds like a lot of fun, Miles.
Yeah, I think it'll really be cool to be traveling around the country and really get, a totally different view of how people go about building their railroads and what's in their mind. What do they want to accomplish with their plan? And that's what Bill, the track planner, and I were talking about earlier. If you haven't actually been to a railroad that operates, you really need to go before you start putting pencil to paper or calling Bill or doing anything for a plan, because you kind of need to know what you want to accomplish with your railroad.
Yeah, that's some of the questions that people could be asking, either you or Bill, and get a good aspect or a good view of, you know, that's like me. I mean, we have a railroad here, but Bill knows, but it's evolved into just a small, privately owned subline that used to be owned by Union Pacific and Burlington Northern. And so now it's privately owned. They still ship a lot of stuff out of here on rails. They store a lot of cars here. But what I was trying to get at is a good question on asking, where to start. I mean, if you're into trains and you want to do a railroad, I mean, go online and start looking at different railroads in Union Pacific or Burlington Northern or some of the ones that that I don't know much about in the East Coast. So
Well,
I'm excited.
I think it even needs to go back to the basic concept. What I have some premise that or some requirements that I put on a railroad. I want my railroad to be friendly to the people that come in who have never seen my railroad. I don't like switches and controls that are hidden. I used to go into some railroads and they'd say, well, twist that tree over there, the third one from the right, and it'll throw that switch back there. Or push that no trespassing sign back and forth, and that toggles this switch over here. Or, oh, you're here in aisle 3? Well, your train will come out over there in aisle 4. You got to go over. To me, that's not a friendly railroad.
Yeah.
Because I'm not part of the clique. I'm not part of the group. I've never been there before. How do I know that I need to go from aisle 3 when my train disappears over to aisle 4? Or that I know that I need to twist the tree? So that's one premise that I always had. We're getting off, but I'll do a little bit. And the other thing is that I really want it to be, the camaraderie, is more important to me than the operation of the trains. It's more important that my crew gets along and likes each other than it is. I mean, a lot of people operate these things with switch lists and Form 19s, and you need this to get out of the yard, and you have to call the dispatcher. I used to be a railroader. I was actually a switchman, brakeman, and a yard master for several years. If I wanted to do that, I'd go back to work for the railroad. I want my railroad to be fun, where we talk and we laugh a little bit and we have a good time. So that's why I say you need to go to some operating sessions and experience it. We have some operators here in Kansas City that you almost don't talk, and you're afraid to death to make a mistake because they'll demote you. You're foreman this week, you might be a switchman next week, for one screw up. So I think you have to experience these operating sessions. You have to understand what you're asking Bill or yourself to design.
Cool.
That's all some very valid points, Monty. I haven't done a whole lot of operational layouts, but I've been there where we use car card system and stuff, and I mean that's a little easier than some of the other methods, but it takes some practice to get used to that,
That's right.
You got to get into using radios and calling for approvals, like you said. But there's some balance in there somewhere, and it all depends upon the club you belong to.
It really is easy to go too far, but car cards are tangible, and you can hold them. And I've tried the computer systems as well, and I use computer systems for a tremendous amount of control on my layout. But for actually switching, having a tangible little piece of card in your hand that you can work with to move the car is much more human approachable. And I agree on every point, really, but it's very, very easy to go too far, but you do need to go far enough. And what's far enough is going to depend on your crew of operators, and not even just you. Track warrants are very simple, and they work really well for some people in certain areas. Timetable and train order, there's all these different types, and I do train order on top of CTC. It's a really nice balance of having to watch a schedule, so there's a little pressure, yet still having signals to tell you you're clear and you can just do your job. But I agree, if you're not having fun, you're missing the point.
That's right. This is a hobby. You're supposed to have a good time.
Bill, Mr. Baranik, on your designs, when you design, can you expand? Because me and you talked about it in regards to thinking beyond your layout. That your layout's a small part of a national railroad.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to would like to do, guys, with my time on these shows is I think what Miles is doing is going to be great, and I think we can play off of that, especially with my show, in that I'm finding on a lot of the YouTubers that I'm designing layouts for, they understand what I'm trying to do, but sometimes they don't completely understand how I'm setting up this operation to make this layout operate. Going back to Miles for a second, Miles, when you get down to Steve Priest's layout, I want to see, does he still have that almost 3 or 3.5% grade on a turnback curve that's completely hidden?
Well, that's the reason I kind of hesitated on what he's got. I have not been to his new house. He moved
He
almost
moved.
a year and a half,
Okay.
2 years ago.
Okay.
So this railroad that we're going to see has never been seen before actually out in public, except he had some of the bench work available at the National Narrow Gauge Convention that we had here in Kansas City last fall.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody's really seen kind of the progress that he's doing now on the railroad, to the best of my knowledge, outside of his crew.
His old layout was interesting in that when you looked at it, it was completely linear. I mean, you had to walk with your trains and everything, and it did change heights. The interesting thing was the grades weren't that high, and then all of a sudden you try to figure out, well, how did he get from this side of the peninsula over to this other side, and he's 6 or 8 inches lower. I mean, it's not that far. Well, he hit about a 3 or 3.5% grade. He hit it. You never see it. You never know it was there. Yes. And I thought that was just a really, really neat way to design, because unless you were underneath the layout, you would have never knew that was there. It was a great.
Well, and the other thing I really thought was clever, I've talked about it some when I've talked about doing bench work. He did, of course, the 2-level bench work.
Right.
At least. I think he had it only 2 levels in most places. But on his upper level, he had boards sticking out. I need an example here. Use my pencil for a second. He had a board sticking out of the wall, coming straight out. And normally you would think of taking the brace, if my hand is the wall, you would take the brace on the bottom side.
He didn't
do it that way because that takes away from the background for that lower level. It decreases the amount of background that I have to scenic this lower level. So what he did was he put his brace at the top, like this, if I can hold it that way. Now he had the trains out on here, and he had the hillside coming back up, covering up his brace. I thought it was super clever.
Yeah.
Then he could hide his lights in that bottom of that upper section.
Well, also on one of his turnbacks is where he actually was on rollers, and you turned it out to get to the furnace and the air conditioning system.
Yes, the entire section of the layout, which was probably 4 foot cylindrical, rolled out and allowed him access. I'm hoping that he has a big enough house. He's moved into a much larger house, so I'm hoping he has a big enough house now that won't be quite necessary. But then he's so creative with where he puts tracks, it wouldn't make any difference what was there. He'd find a way around it.
I think I just want the people that are listening to know that will be a very, very interesting tour. I've met Steve. I know who Steve is, and he's first class all the way, without any question.
You bet. The entire family is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What I plan on doing with my time on next year for my 6 shows, and I'd like some input from you guys that are on the show tonight. I would like to do a little more Q&A things where people are on the show. They have a question about their track plan. They don't know quite how to solve it. They don't know, it isn't working for them. I would love to be able to answer those things. I mean, most of you people that know me, I can talk for 35 minutes or an hour without any problem, but you're going to get sick of hearing me talk. And you know, one of the things I do, if all of you read the e-magazine, of course, I've been writing those articles on those 7 elements that I use to design with. I can make one show out of 1 or 2 of those elements if we want to do that, but I think we're just repeating something I've already done. So I'd rather have, if it's through the question and answers that come up on the screen, or it's from the 8 or 9 people that are going to be on the show, I would like to have people ask questions, because one of the things I think is really lacking in the YouTube community in this model railroading area is the understanding of how to design these layouts so they operate, they run like a real railroad, and you can bring your friends over. You just don't have to run trains yourself. You can run it like it's a miniature real railroad. And as Bill Graham said earlier, that's one of my pet things that I talk about in almost all of my stuff is you're building a railroad empire, but it's very, very small. Think of it as just a small section of a nationwide system. That's where staging becomes so important to do that. And if I can get people, it happened with Bill and I the other night. We were on, and this all happened by accident. Bill brought his track plan up on the screen because he had a question about something, and it took me a couple minutes to tell him what to do and how to solve it. And when we got all done, I says to Bill, Bill, we can make a whole show out of doing that. Having people show me a track plan, say, do I have a problem here? I'm having a problem here. What can I do to correct it? And I just on my desk here, I got today from a kid out in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. As a matter of fact, so he's not a long ways from you. He's building Fremo, and he's got to build two Fremo modules, and he's having a terrible time figuring out how to design a track plan for 2 Fremo modules. You wouldn't think that'd be a big deal, but for this individual, it's tough. You can't figure it out. So I'm gonna help him. And I'm going to do that one. I'm doing gratis free because it's really not going to take me that long to do it. And he was really struggling. He was really, really struggling. So I'm going to try to help him out, see if we can get him going on that.
Well, Bill, I noticed one thing. Andrew Gilmore popped in our chat here. How about doing a show in small layouts, say 36 inch by 8 feet? Maybe small shelf type stuff.
Well, that's probably a misconception that everybody has that I only design big layouts. It's really not true. Phil that's on Wyman, his is not a big layout, but I helped him out on just a couple things that he didn't see when he was designing it that's going to make it a whole lot more operational friendly. And I don't consider Phil's to be a big layout there. It's certainly not real small. The club I belong to, we used to do pizza layouts. I don't know if anybody knows what a pizza layout is.
I've heard the term. I don't know what exactly it means.
Well, what it was a contest, and you could design. You were given us the size of a pizza pan, whether it was a large pizza, whatever it was. But you designed a running railroad on the pizza pan. Now, guess what? It only ran in a circle, but you should have seen how the guys figured out how to do a lot of scenery look. And I think most of them we did on it was a 15-inch pizza pan or a 12-inch pizza pan that you did. And most of them were in scale. The guys that were doing it was an in scale. But the problem is for those kind of layouts, I really don't think anybody needs me. There's not much you can do. But this Fremo layout modules I'm going to do, it's going to be kind of fun to do it because they're a little different in that the two ends that butt each other up sit at a 5-degree angle. They're just not perfectly square, so the track is going to have a little bit of a curve going around it.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
Here's it. You and I talked about this. Every time you write an article and we put it in, we chat about the article.
Sure.
And to me, when you look at what you've already written, I think it almost becomes a prerequisite. I mean, I don't want to use that word necessarily, but it becomes something very useful that I think people should go back and reread the articles. And from that, I'm very sure they will come up and generate questions for the show.
Sure.
And that's something to go back and look at and gel together. And there's always something in there that I found that I look at an article that you've written before and read it. There's something new in there every time I read it. I'm like, oh, I missed this. How did I do that?
Yeah.
And there's some intricate knowledge in there.
Well, and I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I would never pretend to be the smartest guy in the room. But as I talk to my clients and as I talk to people, where I live out here in Colorado, within 40 minutes of my house, I operate on 5 layouts, and 3 of them are absolutely world-class layouts. And these guys hold very serious but very, very person-friendly op sessions. And so what do I gain from that? I gain a heck of a lot of knowledge about how railroads are supposed to work, which automatically applies to what I'm trying to design for people and that. And I'm maybe I'm kind of on a campaign or a high horse here, but I just would like to see more of this YouTube community get into this operations side of the model railroading, as opposed to what I maybe unkindly call the rail fanning side of the hobby, where you put the trains on and you watch them run. Nothing wrong with that. I'm perfectly okay with that, but there's a whole other part of the hobby that people are missing out on, I feel.
Oh,
Hey, Bill, Taki Haywood put a little comment up there thanking you.
I see that. Yeah. It's too bad he's not on, because I did something for him that was kind of fun. I designed a layout for a gentleman. Bill Graham, you'll enjoy this. I don't think I even told you this. I designed a layout for a gentleman in North Carolina, and he wanted a big city scene to be on the peninsula. So I was designing it, and was doing what I thought was okay, and then I had this space that I didn't know what the heck to do with it. So all of a sudden I'm sitting there looking at it, and I'm going, wait a minute, that's a perfect shape to put a baseball diamond in. So I made a park, and I put a baseball diamond in this thing. And I sent it to this gentleman in North Carolina, and he thought it was great. On Tacky's layout, we did some modifications to even to his new plan. We've modified it once or twice now. On his layout, I took and he wanted to do some changes, so I had room to put that baseball park in. And I decided, just for the fun of it, I'm going to put it in his layout, on his design too. He sent me a note. That was the best thing about the whole plan. It wasn't how I arranged the track. It wasn't how I did this or that. It was we put the baseball diamond in there.
Taki, you need to make that the World Series. Put the scoreboard up there.
But those are the fun things that I do and that. But for me, it all comes back to operations. Because it's fun to build. It's fun to design the layout. It's fun to build the layout, but then what do you do after it's built? What's the next step beyond that? And that's, in my mind, making it run like a miniature transportation system. And that's what I'd like to concentrate on in the show. And I think with what Miles is going to be doing with these layouts, I think it's going to play well. I think it'll work.
I think so too. I really do. I think it's going to play real well.
I totally agree with that too, Bill. I mean, that if you take, and maybe depending upon what they do with the layout he tours, and next month discuss that type of operation, whether it be car card or timetable, and dovetail in, that would be very interesting.
Well, Dude asked me earlier before we came on live if I would be willing to come into one of the hangouts, because the guys are going to be talking about JMRI's car card system. And I told him, I says, I don't think you want me there. And I probably shocked him a little bit, but he said, why? And I said, I'm not a fan of computer-generated switch lists. And again, I operate on 4 or 5 layouts out here. One of the gentlemen uses Ship It. Everybody else uses car cards. And here's my pet peeve about car cards, or my pet peeve about switch lists. And it's all human nature, human error. This layout that uses the Ship It program is 50 feet by 30 feet. And it's got a peninsula that runs almost 35 feet long. One peninsula on this layout. Big layout, lots of industry, lots of places to switch. All that has to happen is, and they'll run about 6 crews, there'll be about 10 or 12 guys operating on this layout. All one crew has to do is misspot a car. And all of a sudden, we got all kinds of problems because the computer program says the car is supposed to be over here, but the car got over there. And then on a big layout like that with, I don't know, maybe 100 different areas to switch cars into, somebody has to physically go around and find out, where did that car go? What happened to that car? If you're using a car card and a waybill system there, which is what I used for many years, if somebody misspots a car at the wrong industry, it's no big deal, because in the next operating session, if the car card gets turned, which normally they do, if the car card gets turned, then that car will move out of the industry it wasn't supposed to be at, but then it'll go to an industry where it is supposed to be. So it automatically corrects itself there. It's self-correcting. That's not the case with Ship It, and I don't know that much about JMRI. I really don't want to talk about that, but
it's very similar, Bill, because I mean it generates computer switch lists and various other forms, and it's subject to that exact same problem. You know, you basically, if you get everything right, you can walk into the next session, pick up where you left off. But like you said, you misspot a car, the computer doesn't know it's there.
That's right.
So someone has to inventory it and correct the record, which you can go and correct the record, and then pick up, but someone's got to do that.
Well, the problem with Ship It was, too, is, what the program did, at least my limited knowledge of it, is it generated op sessions for you. So it took the information from the last session and it regenerated a new session, move cars, based on what was entered into it originally. On this layout that I operate on that I talked about, the gentleman had a problem for almost 4 op sessions. Not one coal car moved in and out of a mine there because something was wrong with the way he had set it up. It didn't move cars in and out of that car. Then all of a sudden, in like the 5th or 6th op session, it decides to move cars there. And that. Yeah, and so that's my. If it's like everybody says. I'm old enough to remember when I worked with computers and it was garbage in, garbage out. If you don't get it right to start with, it sure isn't going to be right when you're trying to use it.
Well, you're right. I've read a lot of things from the guys on the JMRI forums about operations, and it can be very difficult because there's a lot of complex layouts that cars need to move several points between, like the departure point and its final destination.
Yeah.
So therefore, you might have to set waypoints at spurs, sidings before it gets to its destination, and it gets hairy as all the devil to do that.
That's exactly right.
I will say that it does, that the JMRI, for example, which is the one I'm messing with some, and using it with waybills too, scales pretty well when you get into some complicated things. So I operate a coal railroad where we ship 4 to 5 different types of coal in different sizes and different qualities, and they're shipping ladle of shipping, whatever, the shipping order from the mine that tells us about coal qualities. And that gets very hard to recreate with car cards alone. So adding car cards in combination with JMRI to control the master switch lists and then generate car cards with it. I like the idea of having a car card, a physical, tangible piece of paper that moves with the car. I'm a total believer in that. I'll back you up 100%. But having a computer system that can handle those bill of lading, that's the document I'm thinking of, the bill of lading for that will declare the coal quality and all that other stuff, because Georgia Power and Electric wants coal that has 70% BTU or 70% ash and 500 BTU, blah, 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 blah. And again, for some people, that's going too far in operation. For my railroad that ships predominantly coal, that is a very, very interesting part of operating my railroad since I have a prep plan. So if you don't take that into account, it can be fairly boring to haul empty cars to a place and haul loaded cars away. That would get boring. But the bill of ladings kind of make it exciting, but it requires a computer.
I operate on a layout, Andy, that is Pennsylvania. It's in the Pennsylvania area, mid-50s or so, late 50s. I operate a coal mine, and it's got one whole shelf wall is a coal mine, and I operate that. I've operated it a half a dozen times. I would guess, maybe more. What he does, which is interesting, is he doesn't have the yard. When they bring me empty hoppers up to this coal mine, he doesn't have the yard master block the cars according to, in the case of this railroad, it's by the road name on the hopper.
Sure.
There'll be NNWs, there'll be Pennsylvanias, he's got a couple, 2 or 3 different ones. When I get the cars up at the coal mine, they come in completely unblocked. So my first job is to block the cars so that all the N&Ws are together, all the PRRs are together, and so on. Then what he has it set up is we have plastic boxes on the floor, and they're named N&W, PRR, and so on. After I get the cars reblocked up at the mine, then I run them underneath the coal tipple. As I bring them out of the coal tipple, if it's N&W cars, I go into the N&W box and I pull out coal loads, put them in the cars there as they go through the coal tipple there, and that as they're loading. And it's funny because, to be honest with you, I didn't even know what I was doing the first couple of times I did it. I just did what he told me to do, and he uses a car card system, what the car card said. I says, why am I doing this way? And he says, because certain types of coal got shipped to certain places.
Yep.
And he says, the N&W shipped certain types of coal, the Pennsylvania shipped another type of coal. And we even got so serious about this, Andy, that we had 2 or 3 tracks underneath the loading tipples there. You had to spot the cars on the right track, because that's the tipple that the right coal came out of.
Absolutely. I'm dealing with the same thing. And also, I model 1950, precisely, and it much like what you're talking about in the 50s. Modern era, they operate blocks of cars as a single unit, and they transfer 90 cars over the layout, or not over the layout, but over the road as a single unit. In 1950, they didn't do that. 90 coal cars had 90 bill of ladings associated with them, and they treated every coal car as if it were a bunch of box cars. Again, that adds challenges, and I think it creates a tremendous amount of interest to the operation, especially if you're operating a railroad that's not an industrial switching area that has tanks and flats and boxes, blah, blah, blah.
This layout is not that big. It's in a room slightly bigger than mine. But when I operate that coal mine during an op session there, I'm there for almost 3.5 hours, and they've only brought me 2 trains. But it's all the other things I have to do. And plus, we've got it set up now where, you can only take so many cars out because there's only so much room at the yards or the passing sidings, because there's passing sidings after they leave the mine to get back to the yard. And there's just a lot of operations that I feel that the YouTube community is missing, and really I think it's the really fun part of the whole hobby.
I think that's definitely a topic that you should cover, because that would go a long way to bringing a whole new aspect to a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to pick on Mr. Ross, but since he's in the room here, I can talk about him.
Uh-oh.
Jim, did you get all the information?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
And you read it over, I hope?
Yes, I did.
Okay. When I wrote that operations plan for you, were you a little surprised when I said you would start the operating session with the train up there in the mountains? Did you understand what I was getting at? That's probably what I'm asking.
No.
Okay. What I want, and Jim's is a great example, because we took Jim's layout and we doubled the size of it in the same room, basically. Or maybe we didn't double it, but we're at least 40% bigger than what he had before. And that, because he's got a small room, small layout, but he wanted to operate it in some type of prototypical manner, what I suggested was, and we've got two main lines on Jim's layout. We have what we call a high line, which is the mountain line. And then we have a river line, which obviously is down along the river. At the start of an off session, what I told Jim I wanted to do was have a train sitting up in the mountains. That train would have cars in it that were going to eventually come to his railroad. What he would do is he would start that train at the beginning of the off session. I don't care if he lets it run around the room once, twice, a half a dozen times. It doesn't make any difference. But at some point, that train needs to come into the yard, unhook its engines, send its engines over to the servicing facility. The yard master sorts the cars out, because all those cars in that train are going to industries on Jim's layout, on his new design we've got there. what is happening during the off session is those cars will eventually get out to those industries. There will be cars at those industries where Jim will bring those cars, or they'll bring those cars back to the yard. And the last train to go out at the end of an op session is a train that's shipping cars away from his layout. They'll make up the same type of train that he brought in at the beginning of the op session. It'll go back out on the layout. It can run around 2 or 3 times, I don't care. But that train stops up in the mountains and just sits there. And then the next op session, the cars that are in that train get their waybill switched over so that they're now coming back onto his layout to go back to his industries. But that train never goes into staging, it never goes anywhere, but it just sits up there on the layout. And at the beginning of the layout, beginning of the op session, then you run the train. Now, a lot of people wouldn't think that way. A lot of them say, well, everything has to be setting somewhere not on the main line. That's not true. This is how you do it when you don't have hidden staging or staging yards to work with. You can still operate the railroad. Plus, I think I gave you, Jim, you can run a number of locals and you can run a number of turns also that you'll be able to do. Jim, if you don't understand anything I wrote, please get a hold of me. Please, ask me questions. Have I talked enough, or would you like me to talk some more?
No. This is Bill Graham. I second that when you say call and you don't understand, because I don't understand anything, and I'm always calling you, and I'm always calling Miles, my new best friend, and Barry when I have an electrical problem, and when I want to get philosophical, I call up JD. And when I just want to, I'm meandering here, but.
But then when you need your snowblower fixed, you call me.
Yes, that's right. I called Duda. All the way in Utah.
I would like to cite one other thing that happened. I think it's very interesting. I designed a layout for a gentleman in North Carolina, and he had a round the wall donut hole layout, and he got dissatisfied with it. So I told him what I wanted to design. Yeah, that sounds good. Do that. So I designed it. Got it all done. I was really happy with it. Thought I'd done a great job. I sent it to him, and he calls me up, and he says, I don't understand how this is going to work. And I says, okay, what do you need to know? He says, you've got all these view blocks and everything on there, so I can't see the whole layout. And I said, no. And he says, well, I was going to build this so that I put my control panel in the center of the layout, and I can stand there and watch the trains run around. And I thought to myself, that's very interesting, because that's exactly what they did 30 years ago. That was very common, a central control point, and you stood in one point and you just kind of watched the trains run. And he honestly thought that's the way it was still done. So just by sheer luck, I said to him, we were on a phone conversation, I says, have you ever been to an operating session? And he says, no, but I have been invited to one. I says, please go. I says to that. And I says, if it's an operations layout, I think they'll have it designed so that I think it'll open your eyes up. So he said, I'm going to do that next week. He called me the day after he went to the op session, and he says, the light bulb went off. He says, what I did is I had designed him a layout with the peninsula, and no matter where he stood in the room, he could only see 30% of the layout. He could never see 100% of the layout at any point. He said he went to this op session, and he was helping an engineer run a train, and he says it was so cool because he says as we followed the train, every time it went around a corner, you didn't know what was around that next corner. And he says it made everything feel larger, feel bigger. He says, now I completely understand, he says, what you designed and why you designed it that way. And, this is the kind of thing I'd like to have people understand and know about. I hope that's making sense to people.
Yeah, and I tried to respond to you there, but I was double muted and didn't realize I had my mic muted at the same time and couldn't figure out why you weren't hearing me. But
no, I didn't hear you.
But yeah, no, I didn't. I really don't understand a lot of this stuff. Obviously, I don't understand probably 99% of it. So, but I'm learning. I'm slow, but I'm getting there.
You're trainable, aren't you?
My wife thought so.
I
She
think you
just
are.
needs to get a bigger whip, is what's wrong.
Well, we changed Jim's around pretty good. We modified from what he had there pretty good. I personally, I thought for the space we had to work with, we did great with it. He came up with a lot of good ideas.
Well, I'm liking it. I'm looking forward to building. In fact, I was stripping some track off today when this started up.
You know, that's my real goal, Jim. Is I get all these guys to tear down with the hand. Make them start over again. Ask Mr. Graham; he knows about that.
Now, what do you do with customers that you help out and you land? Everything's all laid out and you've sent the plans out, and then instead of doing a Walton and Sons lumberyard for Walthers, he gets the bright idea to change that into a lumber mill.
Okay.
How hard is it to try to finagle that area to make a lumber mill fit instead of a lumber yard?
The problem is, this is a very common thing, Jim. Unfortunately, you've got no monopoly on this. What I try to explain to people is there's a hell of a difference between designing a spur for a sawmill as opposed to a lumber yard. You're not talking apples and apples there. No.
Right.
If you design for a sawmill, you're talking. If depending on what kind of sawmill you're talking about, you've got to have. If you're going to drop logs off, you got to have a lake. You got to have a lake that the logs float over to go up into the sawmill. Everything gets expanded. Everything gets bigger. And on your layout, I wouldn't recommend it. I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't recommend it because you don't have enough space to justify the sawmill. Now,
Gotcha.
Do this. Don't build the Walthers. This is the big problem I have sometimes is people take me too literally. I've had some clients who I've sent them a list of the buildings and they've ordered them from Walthers. Exactly like I put them. I says, you don't have to do that. I says, and take your situation. If you don't want to put that Walton Lumber Company from Walthers on there, just design your own lumber company that happens to fit in that spot.
Well, no, what happened was I went to a train show.
You bought something.
And got a heck of a deal on this lumber yard that I just couldn't pass up, even though I didn't really have room for it. I've got. I'm going to pass the savings on to another one of my modeling friends on YouTube here, if I decide I couldn't make it fit. And I kind of figured I was trying to stuff 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack. I kind of figured that, but I wanted to ask you what you thought before.
I'll tell you what we could do. We could take out the bay seam and the wharf seam and put the sawmill in there in place of it.
Take out the what?
The bay.
Man. Oh, I can't do that.
I know.
That's what asking me to cut my arm off.
Well, and I told Bill this too. When I look at layouts, everybody's got sawmills and coal yards, and they've done these, iron ore, and I don't see a lot of pier bay modeling done. I mean, it's been done. I mean, there's some out there, but I don't see much of it. And I wanted something just a little bit different than what everybody else had, and that's why the old Bachman 2-bay engine house was important to me, because I see all kinds of Pikes Peaks and the Walther kits, and I just don't see that old Bachman 2-bay engine house, and I think it's an interesting looking engine house. So I wanted something just a little bit different, so when someone sees pictures or videos of my layout, they go, hey, that's one I haven't seen before, or, hey, I don't see that much of it,
I think what you're saying, Jim, and I think it's normal, is that everybody takes literary license or poetic license or modeling licensing. I know an author who wrote a book who said that in one part of the book he person that he described in the character hit a home run through Yankee Stadium through the outside the stadium, but it hit the top of the facade of Yankee Stadium, and there was a piece of wood embedded in it from it. But he took literary license because that's made out of concrete. So it's the same thing here. You're taking modeling license and you're changing it to what it is that fits your need, simply because it's the norm that everyone else does. I was in the same boat. Bill had designed. I had told him in regards to the closet area that he designed for a brewery in there, and everybody has a brewery, and I just happened to decide. I said I want to put something other than a brewery because everyone has one. Either White Stone Brewery, Pabst Blue Ribbon, whatever. And I happened to come across a truck that had the Brooklyn Lollipop Company on it. So ideas formulate, and it's all right to change them because it's your layout.
I didn't get my shipment in, by the way.
The lollipops that I'm finding out, the molds are pretty tough to get, and since the railroad's not really operational, and I'm having a bit of a problem with if Gino's listening, I'm having a problem with the Birmingham Southern line of shipment, so we're waiting for that. I have a question for Miles in regards to scenery. Since the natural order is when you come into a layout, this is on scenery. I had somebody come in the other day, a visitor, and they looked at the Brooklyn sand and gravel, and what I did was I took the sophisticated finishes that give you the rust kind of finish on it, and I did the roof because the roof was a tin roof. I just did the roof, and the rest of the building was not touched weathered wise. But the person who came in, he's a model railroader too, he was like very intrigued with the weathering on this Brooklyn sand and gravel, and I was like, I said to him, I really haven't finished it yet. He goes, oh, this looks really good. It wasn't until he left I realized that we tend to have looked down on our models, and I just did the top of the roof and some of the cantileries and some of the piping, but I didn't touch the rest of the building. Now, is that a norm? Is that something you can get away with without having to do anything else?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say that you want to get away with it, but yeah, I do a clinic on roofs because you're right. Every time I go to a convention, I take the camera, and especially if I'm staying in a room that's up high at all, I take pictures of roofs because the detail of what's on there is absolutely phenomenal. And in normal life, we never see what's up there. You can tell because people leave chairs and baskets and tar buckets and trash and sticks and you name it, it's up there on that roof, and once it's up there, it stays forever. But if you want to make it look real, you really need to add all that detail to your buildings, because the few times that we do get up high in a hotel or tower or whatever, you see it, and then if you don't see it on the model, you go, well, that looks too clean, it doesn't look right. So yes, you want to weather all your roofs, and you want to do something that kind of feels prototypical. Again, you can do your artist license on that. But modern roofs have walkways almost like the tops of box cars or stock cars for the people that are attending to the building to walk around without disturbing the gravel or the tar or the tin or whatever's up there. And those walkways almost always connect air conditioning units and all kinds of water treatment units, you name it, anything that's up there, antennas or whatever. So you can do all kinds of details to the roof, and you should do it.
And I would also add to that layout height is a critical factor in how you model. If your layout is at 40 inches, you have to do different types of scenery to compensate for that fact. My layout is at eye level. My eye look 1 inch above the top of rolling stock. So when I'm modeling buildings, yeah, I'll put some stuff on the top because there's people who are taller than me. I'm slightly height challenged, but I don't butt my head very much. But for other people, I do have to model that stuff. But for me, building interiors become an absolutely critical thing. And they're not for a lot of modelers. And I've mentioned that to you before, Miles, that I was really enamored with your Trainmaster TV stuff on building interiors, because if my layout's at eye level and interiors are not a luxury, they're a critical component and absolutely required, because majority of the buildings on my layout, the first floor is just below my eye line and the top of the building is just above my eye line. And that means I can't get away with that. So I think it has all of our layouts are different. We all say that stuff all the time. But what you can get away with, where you have to put the focus, whether you can get away with puffball trees, which I'm not a fan of at all, but there are people who believe in them and they like them. And there are situations where they work okay on certain layouts at certain distances. But on my layout, again, at eye level, I can't get away with puffball trees. You can see the fact that the tree armature's not there. So.
Well, in your buildings, Andy, do you weather the sides of the building as well as the roof?
Do I? Yes, I weather everything. I mean, like building I'm working on right now is, I've got, the peeling paint effects and such. I even do the, peeling paint effects and stuff. I got some trim work to do. I just got this yesterday. So peeling paint effects are pretty heavy. I mean, this building is just a few years after I modeled. This building got tore down. I do some dry painting effects on the doors and such so that there's some weathering, and I do that on the side that opens because it slams against the jamb, and it wears and water materializes and does more damage to the door there. I've even warped doors a little bit to make them look like that. And like I said, this building for me sits at eye level. So I can't get away with not having an interior, which means I have to have the little armatures in there for controlling the interlockings. So the only thing I wanted to add to that equation is that your layout is going to determine what you can do. Like in Miles's case there's no reason to put any building on top of that Lux and Mercantile behind him. It would take an 8-foot tall man to, if he had some basketball players who operated with him, maybe he needs to slap an air conditioner up there. But these buildings in front of him will require some detail.
Yeah, I've got to put all kinds of detail in on top of this, and I've got roof access hatches and everything going in there. But other than that, up here, if I do, even nowadays we're 2015, I still see water tanks setting on the buildings in downtown Kansas City. So even though I can't see really what's on this roof, I do need to see a water tank, or in this case the elevator tower or something like that sticking up. But Andy's 100% right. It depends on the height of the building. This one's exactly at my height, but if I brought Larry Alford or some of the others in here that are much taller than I am, I'd have to have all kinds of detail on here, and that's what I'll have to do in order to get this building to show up. This building, I don't care unless it's a kid. He's going to see onto this building, so I've got to do all kinds of detail on it.
And then there are certain things you want to add because they're awesome. I mean, those old wooden water towers are just awesome. So if there's a chance to slap one of those on top of a building, that's just a very cool model.
That's right.
Say, Andy, I want to tell you a quick story here. You're talking about how the height of your layout. I designed a layout for a gentleman, and then he sent me a note last week. He wants to revise it. So it's going to be a 3-level layout, staging below and then two scenic levels above. Well, we were trying to get the heights correct for everything. He didn't want to use helixes, so I've got long runs to get to the 15-inch difference in height between the levels. Well, I said to him, my favorite height on a multi-deck layout for the main level is anything from 40 to 43 inches. 41, 42 inches is what I like if we're going to do like a 3-level layout, something like that. Well, I did this one, the original one I did for him, which we're modifying now, I did it 36.5 inches. And so I said to him on the phone yesterday, I said, why did we do this at 36.5 inches on the main level? And he says, maybe it's got something to do with my height. And I says, and that is? He says, I struggle to get to 5'7". He said. I says, okay, 36 inches is going to be perfect for you. I says, that'll be fine for you, because that won't make the upper deck so high that he can't see what he's doing on the upper deck. But, you know, sometimes I don't even think about that. I'm about 5'11", 5'10.5", and 4.5 inches doesn't sound, or 3.5 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but it makes a big difference.
Oh yeah, and I'm 5'7" as well, so my layout's designed for that high, big, and eye level. So just about anybody else who comes in is going to have a better visibility. But
Sure.
these new Broadway Limited articulated locomotives that I love so well, I wanted that thing front and center, and I hand lay track with all the tie plates and bolt plates and all the detail parts. I want to see that stuff, so eye level's perfect.
No question, the higher you get it up, the better it looks.
Well, okay, mine right now, I have stacked it up. It's modular. It's modules. They're not portable, but movable, because I'm building a basement. I'm building a house for the wife above the train room up here in the next few years. So, and at the moment, this layout is going to be a multi-deck layout because it's 15 by 15 feet, and I need multiple decks to get the run that I want. So it's 3 levels. The level that's at eye level is not even the top level. Top level is way above eye level, but with the scenery sloped away from the track work, which replicates southwestern Virginia mountain railroading. It's up, you know. Now there's no turnouts up there or anything, but you can just watch the helpers run. But I played with elevations for a while. This layout's been at 5 or 6 different elevations, and I settled on something that's a lot higher than I thought I would like. And as I've operated on this small section, which is something I encourage people to do. A lot of people want to build all the bench work at one time, and then lay all the track, and then run all the fire, and I've done that. I mean, this is number 12 or 13 layouts for me. And this time around, I chose to build a few modules. You know, I've got 4 or 5 modules. I'm building one deck. That deck will be operational. I'm going to enjoy it. And then I'll build the next deck. And I also am not using helixes for elevation changes. I do use helixes, but only to absorb train length so that I can get away with 30-plus car trains.
Sure.
Well, and I think
Go ahead.
another thing on that is you have to consider, what do you want the railroad to represent?
Yeah.
Because I want it to be big city. I'm an O scale. I don't have the luxury that you guys do, that you can put smaller buildings and they look much bigger. This is only 9 stories.
Right.
But if I didn't lower my railroad down to, I think I'm at 39 inches here, I would not have the room. My buildings would be into my ceiling, and it would destroy the illusion that I'm trying to create with the cyclorama and with everything else, that the sky's way up high. So I had to lower my railroad down in order to accommodate the type of the scenery and the look that I want from the railroad.
Absolutely, and I would even contend that what scale you choose to model, unless you have a big collection of something. But I'd been out of the hobby for a number of years, like a lot of people, careers and all those things. When I come back to the hobby, I was open to every scale. I had sold my HO scale off for O scale 2 rail stuff before I quit years ago, and I had done some N scale modeling in the military. I was open to N, HO, I even looked at S. I chose to treat scale as if it were a tool, like a hammer. And instead of everything being a nail, because I have a hammer, I was open to every scale. And I thought that I settled on HO scale because I felt like HO scale would recreate 1950s Appalachian coal hauling better than another scale would. If I had chose to do Colorado narrow gauge, it would have been ON3 or SN3, unquestionably. If I'd wanted to model Canadian, a modern layout crossing the Canadian Rockies, I think I would have chose N scale. And I think that what you try to, and it depends on your space too, but I think what you're trying, some things are easier to recreate in certain scales. You know, Canadian Rockies in O scale would be tough. And Colorado narrow gauge in N scale would be tough.
Talkie Haywood has a question. What are the thoughts of adding scenery to lower level staging yards?
I'll take it first because I designed his. I'm not a big fan of that, but that's because of the way I think about when I design track lines. That lower level is not part of his railroad. That's the beyond the basement part of his layout. That should not, in my mind, that shouldn't be modeled because that isn't what we've got it there. We've got it there for, that's a place for trains to come from, that's a place for trains to go to. So I'm just not a fan of scenic staging areas.
You know, and that became popular a few years ago with like Tony Custer talking about that. I would say that if, as an operator, you begin by picking your train up in staging, then throwing a little ballast down and putting a backdrop up doesn't hurt. It gives you the feel of being in the real world instead of living on plywood. However, on my layout, as an operator, you don't see that train until it comes onto the visible layout.
That's
You
right.
don't pick up your train there. If I can automate it with JMRI so that it just delivers it out of the layout, I will. But even if I can't do that, you will not see your train. You will not OS or on sheet your train as an operator until it's on the visible scenic layout. So my staging will have nothing.
Let me address it from the operation standpoint. I don't care what your viewpoint of the staging yard is. Gil Freitag, who is a master model railroader down in Houston, I think he's a genius at building railroads and operating railroads. He's been doing it for, I don't know, probably 40, 50 years now with a terrific operating railroad. And his philosophy is that you run that track, you get it right, and then you ballast it. And that includes tunnels and staging areas and any place on your railroad. Because if those of us that have ever tried to take a railroad out where you have ballasted track, you know that that track is not going to come out of there. It's almost impossible to get the track out at all. So once you get it right, ballast that sucker. Because the first place you're going to have trouble is the places that aren't ballasted when you go to try and run. So my philosophy is I don't care about the scenery element. I care about the operational element of it in terms of physical operation. I'm not even talking about the ethereal or the card operations or anything else. I'm talking about the actual rolling qualities of the trains. You really need to ballast in tunnels, in staging areas, anything and everything on your railroad. Get it right and then fix it and keep it that way.
Or at least soak it in glue or something like that. And I am really a big fan of these PC board ties. I do not use them on my visible layout. I do not like the lack of detail because I use tie plates and all that stuff. But in hidden sections on my layout, I'm using those PC board ties. Even on flex track, in my helixes, I'm gonna chop a section of the ties out every now and then, put PC boards in. There's nothing as rigid as metal on metal with solder. And I think that also leads back to what you're suggesting, that it's a matter of making everything rigid.
Yes.
One of the things that where maybe Andy and I don't agree, but that's perfectly fine, that's what makes the world great, is I've got a layout sitting here in this basement of this house. It's in a room 16 by 13. It's 4 levels tall with 1 helix. It's kind of interesting how you get to the other levels. But all the track is in, everything's done, it's completely operational. I will hold a minimum of 6 operating sessions on this layout before I put one piece of any kind of scenery on it. Because, yeah, I may be able to design track plans pretty good, but I don't know that I design my own that everything's 100% correct. How will you find out if it's correct? Hold op sessions on it. And you'll find where all your mistakes are at, and you'll look and you go, why did I design it this way? This doesn't work. And you won't know it running it yourself. You've got to put your buddies over to your house and let them run the layout. And they'll find where the issues are at for you. So on my layout, I probably won't do scenery for 2 years on my layout. And I love to do scenery and all that, but I didn't build as many layouts as Andy has. I built about 5 of them, but I always kind of take the attitude, okay, I've been there, I've done that, I know how I can do it, I know I can do it. I want to make sure this thing operates like I planned it to, because there's no reason for me to build a layout unless it operates the way I hoped it would. And that's just that's because of where I come from in this hobby more than anything else. A lot of people love scenery, and they want to. I'm designing one right now for a guy that's going to have a 20-foot canyon, and we're going to get rid of 6 industries because he wants to run trains through a canyon. There.
Well, we're saying the same thing. I think it needs to run and operate properly, and then fix it. But
That's right.
And I don't totally disagree with you for a whole lot of people. In my case, there was a bunch of things, like I said, every layout's different, every layout builder is different. In my case, a lot of things were set in stone with mine, is that I didn't design the track plan. The Norfolk and Western designed the track plan. All I'm doing is recreating it. Every turnout is exactly given. I've got some curves that ultimately make a box instead of a straight line east to west. But other than that facet, if there was a left-handed turnout, there's a left-handed turnout on my layout. I'm also using slightly smaller turnouts instead of the prototype number 12s. I'm using number 8s, whatever. But ultimately, my layout was designed the way the prototype did. And as a prototype modeler, I had the luxury of knowing that that layout has to work because it worked for the N&W for 50 years before they changed it. Whereas if you're designing a freelance or proto-freelance layout, you're right. There's a lot of flexibility in passing sidings and runarounds and various industrial tracks. So it really depends on the layout. And it depends on the modeler. I had not done scenery, not much, on any layout before. I built a lot of plywood Pacifics, and I was bound and determined that that would not happen this time. So I threw some flex track on top of the Homosoak roadbed, run some trains back and forth for a little while, and built several hundred trees. And I have a scenic layout. And then here recently, I started hand laying track. But my roadbed comes off in sections. So I can bring the roadbed to the workbench to hand lay track, to build turnouts, and then I can take it back to the layout and put it in place.
And that's the way John Allen did his entire railroad. He scenic that entire railroad and then laid the track because his philosophy was you don't want to not be able to get to the track. The way to guarantee that, lay it last.
Yeah, John Allen, I would have to say, even after all of these years, and even after things like staging and PCC and all the innovations that have happened in the hobby that were so far after John Allen is still an idol of mine, still the inspiration, and the John Allen covers of Model Railroader magazine are what made me think that I wanted something more than a painted green piece of plywood with a circle of track when I was a teenager. It was John Allen. I'll still give him credit for making me the Model Railroader I am. So. I follow a lot of his philosophies, and I learned to hand lay track because that's what he did, and I still love it to this day, 30 years later.
You know, Andy,
if you'll read the things from John Armstrong, it's the same thing. He was thinking so far ahead about tripoding cars, about the things that he thought of in terms of couplers and all kinds of stuff. The guy's a genius, and you really need to read some of his philosophy because it still holds today. It's physics. It has nothing to do with what we're doing with electronics and everything else.
Right, and I follow a lot of his ideas on overweighting of cars. I weight MMRA times 2.2, something like that, and I try to fake the fact that gravity doesn't match, right? And John Armstrong preached a lot of those philosophies. Short of his very narrow aisles, I'm a huge fan of Armstrong.
Yeah.
And I use some narrow aisles too, but boy, that guy could push the envelope on him.
Well, guys, I wanted to give JD, our awesome EMAG designer here, I wanted to give him a little bit of a tidbit for tonight's show. Maybe he's got something up his sleeve coming up in the next year or in the next issue. And so what do you got for us, JD?
Well, dude, thank you. I always got something up my sleeve, right? The new issue is out. I think it's going to be loaded up tonight, and it should be out for downloading later overnight. A lot of interesting articles in there, including from Bill, track planner, as well. In particular, on the topic we were just talking about what's not part of the main view area and what is staging, what is staging part of the view area, not part of the view area. That conversation is part of the article that Bill has written for this issue. Coming up in January, we're going to put together track plans, a big layout of the community's track plans. So if you have those track plans, send them in. There's a post out there on the community page, on the Google Plus page for that. I'll make sure that it circulates out again. So that's something that we're looking to do January for the anniversary issue.
Hey, I was going to tell you on that. Did you put that on? Do you have a Facebook account?
No, I don't.
Email me all the information on that, and I will put that on Facebook.
Great, we'll do. So that's one of the things that we're looking to do. There's a lot of other things in works that we're still baking, but it's going to be good. We're slowly changing the look and feel of the EMAG as well, and I would say send in those articles because you make the you're part of the community, and the community articles what makes the EMAG happen.
What specific types of articles are you? Just about anything, JD?
Sure. The field is open. The topics are open. It's just a matter of sitting down and thinking about what's important to you in model railroading. And overall, if you recognize the EMAG is very community oriented. The style of articles are about personal experiences with model railroading, with scenery development, with operations. So all of those areas are open. What is your personal experience and growth? Because it's about sharing with the community what you've learned and your side of the world. And when somebody sees what you've done, it innovates them. It makes them think about how they could take what you've done and apply it to their situation. And I think part of the conversation tonight has been about that. How do you take a fixed framework of known tenets of model railroading from the experts and apply them to your situation for somebody who's just starting out, somebody who's done it before getting back in, or somebody who's done it and wants to expand their knowledge base. So similarly, the EMAG is a great platform for something like that. So any type of articles that that center around your personal experience in model railroading is what I prefer.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dude.
Dude, can we do one more promo?
Yeah.
Saturday, Big Bill and I, scenery. We'll be right there doing it. Everybody tune back in on Saturday.
Is the live show this weekend?
Yes, sir.
Oh, punch it out. Go for it, Miles and Bill. It's all yours.
Yeah, Barry and I and
Look
Miles.
behind me, we're going to do all kinds of scenery. We'll have a real good time. And mainly what we're going to talk about is you start the railroad. It's what Jim was talking about a little bit ago. I started one way, and I start to scenic it, and I say, wow, that really doesn't work. And what do you do to change it? What's the thinking process between what you see that works and what you see that doesn't work? And some premises maybe that you ought to go through your mind in what I want from my railroad and how will I accomplish that. So it goes beyond just throwing some green stuff down. We're going to talk about, kind of what you should think about and what you should do in order to make the scenery actually come to life. Bill?
Oh, that's it, Miles. The show will now be hosted by Miles Hale and the next along with Barry, and I'll just be a cheerleader. No. Great job, Miles. That's exactly what we were going to do. Originally, Miles, I called Miles up, and inadvertently I made a mistake on the thing, and Miles was like, okay, so what are we going to talk about? And I was like, well, hey, I'm open for everything. And we were originally going to talk about small hand tools and books and authors, and then I kept back to him, and he came back with this idea, and I think it's a great idea on scenery because I'm in the process of planning my scenery for my railroad, and I'm doing it in sections.
Well, I think we should tell the real story. He sent me an email. Bill sent me an email and said, what are you going to do for the hangout Saturday? And I wrote back and I said, what hangout? I felt like the Russ Weiss that I talked about, way back an hour and a half ago, Nobody ever called me and said, let's do a hangout.
I'm from the school of ambush journaling. Journalists. I come up on you, and I'm like, hey, so you're going to be on this show? And people are like, what show?
What show? Yeah.
Right now. We're on air, live. Let's go.
Hey, it's just like Miles going to go ahead and go to that guy's house and say, oh, by the way, you're televised.
Yeah, we'll be there. No problem.
It's a new form of guerrilla marketing, one-on-one marketing, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. You got to get
Bill and I will have a great time.
But those guys that are out there listening right now, and what Dude said earlier and what JD said earlier, and Barry can concur with me, as you guys can see right now, and if you're listening and you're not part on the panel here, we got a great lineup coming in 2016. We really do. And bringing aboard Bill Baronic and Miles Hale was just the start of it. And these gentlemen were so gracious enough, and they're very busy with their time and the efforts that they have going on other than this, but they were so gracious and gentlemen to come aboard this. And as you guys can see, in the following year, we got a host of interesting programs lined up here. And plus, we have other things that we have lined up that we're looking to do. And we're in the final stages of putting it all together. And it really couldn't be done without you guys out there. You know, Barry, JD, myself, Dude, Gino, John, Troy, the rest of the guys that are all with us, Harry Hawthorne, Jack Hackaway, and Blaine Mansfield, the core group. But you're the guys out there that generate the ideas for us. As JD said earlier, you're the ones that give us the ideas to do this. And we want to just be a little bit more, I shouldn't say, you know, there's Trainmaster TV, Model Railroad Hobbyist Magazine, Model Railroad Magazine. They all have a place, you know. And I think that what we're providing is a basic hands-on. You're actually meeting the people who are doing it that you read that magazine article from or you see on Trainmaster TV. We want to incorporate them as well into this. And I think that that's what we're trying to achieve. So as far as YouTube Model Builders is concerned, we have a host of things that are coming up in the new year that we hope are going to work really well, and that you guys out there, you the hobbyists, are going to embrace and really, you know, take advantage of it, because we want to do it for you, and it's free content, and we want to just make it as interesting as possible. And again, I want to, you know, emphasize that, you know, Mr. Baronic, Bill Baronic, has said he's open for suggestions. You know, you guys can email him, because we talked about this the other day, and I'll say this with Bill here. We talked about this the other day. Bill, you know, everything's not a dollar sign with Bill. You know, it's not about it. You can email him with questions. Am I correct in that, Bill?
Absolutely.
You know, so you know,
can I give a shameless non-commercial plug here?
Sure.
Because I've done it with you. I might as well do it with everybody. If you're ever going through Colorado, please spend one extra day out here. Get a hold of me ahead of time. I will be happy to take you to some layouts that you will have never seen before. I was personally involved with the Greeley Freight Station Museum for many, many years. I'm still allowed to take private tours through there with people behind the scenes. My tour lasts 2.5 hours to take you through and show you everything. I would be more than happy to do that with anybody. Plus, I've had about 2 or 3 other layouts. The guys will more than willingly open up their doors to let me bring you through. And I can show you, when I talk about these operating layouts, as Miles knows in Kansas City, we've got them out here in Colorado like he's got them in Kansas City, and they are well worth seeing. And again, I'll be happy to take anybody on a tour of any of these if you give me just a few days' notice. That's my plug.
Yeah, I'd echo that for Kansas City. Plus, I want to give one more plug. Bill, Barry, Mike Dittinger, Fran, myself, we're all going to the Amherst show, and I saw Bob's Man Cave. Bob was at the Train Fest just last weekend. Excuse me. I saw him filming, and I walked over and said hi to him. Please come over and say hi to myself or to any of those guys when we're there at Amherst. We'll be there on Saturday and Sunday, all day back in the clinic area. Come by, introduce yourself, say hi, get to know us firsthand, and it makes us a lot more communicatable. You know, we can talk to each other a whole lot easier, even across the TV screen. But come and introduce yourself and say hi. We'd love to meet you. Same thing, Fran and I will be, like I said, at the LSR, Lone Star Region Convention. Come by and say hi. Anytime you see any of us, say hi. It's all about camaraderie as far as I'm concerned. It's all about getting to know each other and getting to have more and more friends. So please come to Amherst, say hi. Come to Lone Star Region, say hi. Any of those places where any of the team from Model Railroad University, which is kind of loosely associated with the Model Railroad Builders, where all of us will be, because we all want to say hi to you and see you and just have a chance to talk to you.
And Miles, don't forget that at the Amherst show, I'll be giving out autographed 8x10 pictures of myself.
You would be autographed 8x10.
Yes.
Now I understand that you took that picture with the Mets, so it's you and the Mets together.
Oh!
Sorry.
He shoots, he scores.
I gotta get that. Somebody get that knife out of my back. I can't reach it. Oh,
It's
you
been
killed
30 years. I got to take advantage, okay? Go Royals.
Well, I want to go ahead
A
and
little deep, didn't it?
I want to go ahead and thank everybody that came in the panel tonight, and thanks for Bill and Miles for coming up and doing this introductory of next year. We didn't get too many different questions for tonight, but we had quite a few viewers, believe it or not. I think we were up over 20 there for a while. So I think maybe we're starting to catch a little bit more eyes on some of the members of the community. And I want to remind all of the community members that YouTubeModelBuilders.com is the place to go to find all of your latest stuff, anything to do with the eMag, the Hangouts, and the live show. All the schedule is there. There's a lot of information there to find out about a lot of stuff coming up. Let everybody know that's viewing. If you can see up there, Johnny's going to go ahead and do an after show. So I want to thank everybody for coming in, and JD, thanks for giving the tidbits for the upcoming and the current issue out in the eMag. And we will definitely be seeing Miles this weekend on the Saturday live show. That's 9 o'clock Central Time. And I want to thank everybody again.
I also want to put a plug out there that the YouTube Model Builders, we're trying to get an informal get-together in July in Indianapolis at the NMRA convention there. So we could all meet each other in a little more central location. So anybody that's interested, drop it in a hangout, and we can talk about it and see what we can do. Also, Miles, if thinking of your traveling plans for next year, if you and Fran would like a sidekick, I'm up for adoption. thought I'd put that out there. I'm available.
Well, once again, thanks everybody for coming in, and until the next show, catch you there.
All right.